Hi everyone, welcome to my second volume or edition of Miss Odell Chats, which I'm calling it for no other reason than it came up. I would like to, first of all, before anything, thank everyone who sent me suggestions, who sent me ideas, questions, and who sent kudos. Thanks a lot. That got me going. And I have to say, I thought this morning, God, the first one was so easy because I wasn't going to publish it. So it gets a little harder once I know I'm in it to win it. Anyway, I'm going to pick up pretty much where I left off last time. We were at Apple, and I'd like to talk to you about one day in the life of being at Apple in 1968. This was maybe my third day there. It sure wasn't. It was within the first week, and always got in early. I didn't have my own key then. Later I would get my own key, but I got in early, and Derek set me up with Richard DeLello. He told me that I could help Richard out. So he took me back to an office, back in this offices down a kind of hallway, and he opened a door, and there's Richard sitting on the floor cutting newspaper articles and pasting them into a scrapbook. That's how they did it, guys. Seriously. And so Derek said, Chris is going to help you. So I sat on the floor with Richard DeLello, by the way, who was the other American who worked there for any length of time. He swears he was hired as the house hippie. And obviously he had a very good relationship with Derek, and that's kind of what got him there. Richard was definitely a hippie, Afro, thin guy from New York. And really, I just loved Richard. He just had the purest vibe. That's the best way I can say it, a pure vibe. Anyway, so he and I are on the floor cutting up articles, most press releases about the Magical Mystery Tour, about Apple opening, all those kind of things that were in all the papers. I don't know where they were all from. I assumed at the time they were all English. And after, I don't know, a couple hours of that, Derek came into the office and he said, Chris, would you like to go to lunch? I want to invite you to lunch. And I went, oh, great. Okay, good. So said bye to Richard, be back, Richard. Went with Derek, and we went into his office, and he said, okay, we're going to have lunch with George, meaning Harrison, and a journalist who they trusted very, very much, Don, whose last name has escaped me, but honestly, I will look it up and see if I can find it. He was working for one of the major London papers, which in my mind is the Express or the Mail at that time. And so I didn't know him. I didn't know George, come to think of it. So anyway, we were sitting around in the office waiting, and suddenly George bops into Derek's office. And I mean bops. It was like he just kind of walked with a little bounce. He kind of bounced in. And just this really sort of light vibe. It was exceedingly light. So Derek introduced us, and he said hello, and so we went down and we got into George's Mercedes, and I got in the back seat, obviously, and we were driving along. We were going to the King's Road, to the Aretusa, I believe, Club Aretusa, and so I was just sitting in the back, but I have to tell you, that car smelled just like George. It just, I'm going to jump out there and say it was sandalwood, but I know that when they did when I got to know him later, everything around him smelled like that. It was amazing. I never could figure out how he did that. I keep meaning to ask Patty, and I forget, because it was just like he wafted down the hallway. And I sat in the back seat looking at him in this beautiful smell of incense. It was so wonderful. And I thought, wow, what a handsome guy. And you know what? He was not one of my favorite Beatles. Paul was. Paul was my, we all, us girls back then was like, well, if I could marry one of them, who would it be? And it was Paul. To me, that was the one. But I really, for the first time, saw how handsome George was and, what a charisma he had. He was really interesting. So we end up at the Club Aretusa and we walk in. And I need to tell you, I came to London with one or two suitcases. And I was coming from Hollywood. So I had some Hollywood style clothes, at least back then. And I was wearing this sort of mini skirt and that had a matching cape. And I think the colors were orange and blue. I don't remember any other colors. And they were like a plaid. I just thought it was wonderful. And I'm sure that when we walked into the restaurant, they were looking obviously at George. But I wouldn't be surprised if a few people were thinking, what is she wearing? So anyway, we sat at the table and the four of us had lunch. It was very nice. They mostly talked. I didn't have much to say. Derek would occasionally reach over and say something to me, or occasionally George would say, what do you think? He included me, which was really nice. And I was like, I couldn't believe that I was sitting in this club in London. I hadn't even been there a full week. And I was having lunch with George Harrison. Well, pretty soon all this activity started happening and we just sat there. People left, it emptied out. And then suddenly all the tables were being moved around and all these things were going on. And I was like, what is that? And Derek said, oh, they're having a fashion show. The new Apple Boutique on King's Road's opening. And so we're going to have the opening here and a fashion show. And I'm like, whoa, this day gets better. So anyway, I'm sitting at the table with Derek, George, and Dawn. And suddenly people come in and all of a sudden, John and Yoko sat next to me. Yoko was on the right of me. And I was like, whoa, okay. And then pretty soon Patty joined and she sat next to George. And Derek was wandering around dealing with the press. And I remember, I could just hear the words like, who is that person sitting there? And not only just from people in the room, but also probably from people like Patty. So I, needless to say, felt slightly uncomfortable until Derek came over and said, it's okay, you're cool, just sit here. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. I do remember leaning across Patty at one point, just trying to make conversation, because she would kind of look at me strangely. And I just said, I love the way you do your makeup. Could you show me how sometime? And she looked at me a little odd, but you know what? She just was so classy. She went, oh yeah, sure. Now I failed to mention that before I moved to London, back when I was living in Los Angeles, I don't know, I guess after I met Derek or the idea of going to London first popped up, I remember I used to act out a lot in front of my bathroom mirror. I used to have all kinds of stories in front of my bathroom mirror. So I had this story that I would go to London and I would be at Patty and George's house and Patty and I would be having tea together. And it was a fantasy. It was just a fantasy. But now here I was at the Club Aretusa sitting across from her, asking her to show me how to do my makeup, because I figured, oh good, she'll invite me out and then we can have tea. I was right into the idea. It was also one of the first times that Yoko and John had been in public. And so there was a lot of press around the table taking photographs. And I looked over at her at one point and kind of went, are you okay? You're doing great. And she looked at me kind of like, Okay, I learned later that she didn't need to hear that from me. Excuse me. So anyway, the fashion show started. I have no memory of it whatsoever. I don't know who was in it. I didn't see the clothes. And it was the men's boutique, so they were men's clothes, which may be one reason why I didn't really notice. So afterwards, after it was all done and everyone had left, Derek said, come on, we're going to go down to the store, which was just down the King's Road, and see it. So he and I started walking down the King's Road towards the Apple boutique, and John and Yoko were ahead of us, and they were kind of walking ahead, and then suddenly John stopped, and he whispered something to Derek, and then they kind of walked on, and Derek looked at me and he said, he wanted to know who this attractive lady was that I was with. And I thought, that is so nice. I like that. Okay, that felt good. So anyway, we went into the Apple boutique. Later, in fact, I don't even think I knew Leslie Cavendish then, but he had his hair salon. He was the Beatles hairdresser and had his hair salon in the basement of the Apple men's boutique on King's Road. So I would be there mostly just to see him. I didn't really spend much time at the boutique in the men's clothing. Anyway, afterwards, Derek, got a taxi and went back, or a mini cab, and went back to Apple on Wigmore Street, and went up to Derek's office. And of course, Derek had a family, and he had to get a train to get back to his home. And so he just said, I feel really bad about leaving you alone, when you just got here. And I said, no, I'm cool. And he said, no, let me make a phone call. You may have if you read my book, you probably read this story, but I'm going to tell it in my own words. So he made this phone call, and he just said, hi, it's Derek. What are you doing? Are you doing anything tonight? Well, I have this really nice American girl who's here, and I thought maybe you could meet up with her and have dinner or go to the pub or something. And he went, sure, okay, great, and then gave whoever it was the hotel where I was staying. So after Derek hung up, he said, okay, I fixed you up with, he's a very nice American boy. He's going to be on Apple. He's just making his first album, and I think you'll really like him. And all I could think was, I didn't come here to go out with American men. That wasn't my goal. But I went, okay, all right, well, let it be. I guess it's better than nothing. So I went back to the hotel, which the Apple had actually booked this room for me. So I went out of the B&B I was in and moved into to this hotel somewhere. I don't even remember where it was, but it was nice. And I had a single room. Well, a single room in London means little, really little. So you kind of walked in, and there was this area at the back with a beautiful view of the fire escape. And on one side of this room was this little twin bed, and not only a few steps across was a desk, and there was a bathroom. And I thought, God, this is the smallest hotel room I've ever stayed in. But I didn't need a lot of space, just me and my suitcases. And then sometime later, there's a knock on the door, and I open it up, and there's this tall, lanky guy. And he goes, hi, my name's James Taylor. And I went, hi, I'm Chris Odell. Come on in. So we went out and had something to eat. And, he seemed nice enough. I just wasn't interested in meeting an American guy at that time. He was kind of little bit too laid back for my taste. Nothing that, I didn't have any chemicals going. I didn't have any of that chemical stuff. But anyway, but he was nice. So we talked about being in London. He had just come from, I think, Ibiza or somewhere. That's kind of all I really got to know about him. And then he had his guitar with him, and he sat down on the floor, and he started playing his guitar. And this went on for a while, and it was getting later. And my goal was to get up early and get to Apple. I wanted to be there early so I would have something to do because I didn't have a job yet. Anyway, he started playing the guitar, and after a while, I kind of gave up. And I thought, this guy really isn't going to go. And of course, I was not one to say, you have to leave now. That wasn't my style. So I thought I better get ready for work the next day. And at that time, it was very fashionable. You may remember this, ladies, very fashionable to take giant jumbo orange juice cans, cut out both ends of them, get long pins, bobby pins, and we rolled our hair up in these very big orange juice cans, and it made it full of life. It just did a lot. At least I thought it did a lot. And then of course we teased it after that, and then sprayed it with a lot of hairspray. But anyway, I started putting the orange juice cans in my hair. And, I don't know that I thought whether he would notice or did. I'm not sure I even cared if he would notice. But I was going to bed. So I said to him, look, stay as long as you want. If you get, if you leave, goodbye. And if you don't, see you later. And I went to sleep. And when I woke up the next morning, he had somehow moved into the other side of the twin bed and was in the twin bed with me. And I'm like, oh my God, with the orange juice cans, I might add. So we got up and he went into the bathroom and started playing his guitar, and I got the orange juice cans out of my hair, and I was going into the bathroom getting ready to do stuff, and he was sitting there playing his guitar. And when I walked in, he said, can I ask you a question? And I said, what? And he said, why do you wear orange juice cans in your hair? And I thought, that took him a really long time to comment. That was really long. And so I said, why do you sing in the bathroom? And he said, because the acoustics are really good here. And I went, okay. Well, that morning he was working on, in my mind, I'm going to Carolina. And that it was, it was nice later. And something about listening to his soft voice and the gentleness of him kind of softened me up a bit. So when it was time to leave, I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to rehearse with my band at the Apple Boutique, which was not far from Apple. And not the Apple Records, not the Apple Boutique on Kings Road, but the first one, the original boutique. And above it was Apple Publishing and rehearsal space for bands. So he was going there and he said, do you want to come? And I went, yeah, I do. I want to hear all of the song stuff you're doing now. Now I'm kind of interested. So I did go. I went to his rehearsal, and then afterwards I went back to Apple and went back to work, and probably went back to scrapbooking for all I know. But anyway, that was one day in the life. That was it. Anyway, I enjoyed it. Again, thank you so much for coming. We'll move on next time and go even deeper into some of this. Maybe I'll even tell you how I got my job, because by this time I still didn't have a job. Okay, thanks again for joining. If you want to reach me, my email address is missodellchats@gmail.com. Miss Odell, C8. I'll put it up on the screen. And see you next time. Thank you. Bye.